Hi everybody, I just wanted to do this video, our last video for this week, on how to solve equations. And this is really a review on what we've talked about over the last couple of days. So I've written out 4 key steps. I thought we could go through them together and then maybe some examples. I'll do the first 2 examples and then you kind of just have the rest of the day to work on the worksheet. Pick any 5 problems to do, try to challenge yourself, and then if you feel like you need extra practice, you can go ahead and do some more. So the very first step that we're going to talk about is that we need to remember to solve an equation. When we are doing that, those words means that we are isolating a variable. So we're getting that variable by itself. And after we do that, when we get that letter, that variable by itself, we're going to figure out how to find its value. And in order to find its value, really what we're doing is we want to make sure that that equation is true, so that left side equals its right side. When you are moving a term, you are really doing the opposite operation that allows that term to go to the other side. And you're applying that opposite operation to both sides of the equation, but sometimes we don't need to show it because we know that if I add and subtract the same number from one side, that's going to be 0. Okay? If equations contain fractions, we're going to clear those fractions first. And finally, if there is a number or a letter in front of a set of brackets, we have to use that distributive property, so we have to expand. And we talked about that expand, that distributive property, as being our rainbow rule. And that means that we take that number that's outside of the bracket and we multiply it into every term that's inside of the bracket. And after that's done, we can get rid of the brackets. Okay, so let's try to do one of maybe each example that we've seen. So in A, I have x plus 10 equals 15, and I want to get 10 by itself. I mean, just by looking at this, you're probably like, okay, well, what plus 10 is 15? I know that x has to be 5, because 5 plus 10 is 15. But let's try to actually solve it mathematically. So, for instance here, if I'm adding 10 on my left-hand side, I want to get rid of 10, right? That's what I want to get rid of. So, to get rid of adding, I need to do the opposite, which is subtracting. And I'm going to do that from both sides. And this is that step that you don't always have to show. You could go right to this step, okay? So I know here that 10 minus 10 is 0, and 15 minus 10 is 5. So that leaves me with x equals 5. Okay, so this is the simplest of the simplest, and I'm hoping that you're all comfortable with doing an equation like this, a step like this. So then let's go down a little bit and try to find a different question. So let's look at this one, F. F is a two-parter. So in F, now I'm looking at 3x plus 4 equals negative 5. I still want to get my x's by itself on my left-hand side of the equation, and I can see that I'm adding 4 here, so the opposite of adding is going to be subtracting. So if I subtract 4 from my left-hand side, I'm left with 3x, and then I have to do it to the right-hand side, like this, and I'm going to be left with negative 9, because negative 5 subtract 4 is negative 9. And now I have to ask myself, what's happening between 3 and x? That's multiplication. What's the opposite of multiplying? That's division. So I'm going to divide each side by 3. So then my 3's cancel out on my left-hand side. That leaves me with x. And negative 9 divided by positive 3 is negative 3. So now I have my solution there. Okay. So now let's look at G. In G, I'm dealing with a fraction. I'm dividing everything by 2. Let's get rid of that fraction first by multiplying both sides by 2. Okay, so if I multiply my left-hand side by 2, I'm going to be left with x plus 4 because my 2's are going to cancel, but I'll show you that. And whatever I do to my left-hand side, I have to do to my right-hand side. So right here, my left-hand side 2's, those are going to cancel. That leaves me with x plus 4, and 12 times 2 is 24. Okay, and now if I'm looking here, I have to work backwards. So if I'm adding 4 on this side, I have to subtract it to get rid of it. And 24 minus 4 is 20. Okay, so that's that fraction question. Now in H, I'm dealing with a bracket. And remember, whenever we're doing brackets, I have to do that distributive property. So I'm going to have to multiply. So I'm going to do that rainbow where I multiply 8 times 1x. And 8 times 1 is going to give me 8. x's. And then now I'm going to do 8 times 3, which is going to leave me with 24. And this all equals 40. Okay. So if I'm looking here, I have 8x plus 24 equals 40. I want to get rid of this positive 24, which means that I have to subtract it. Okay. And 40 minus 24 is going to equal 16. And now I ask myself what's happening between this 8 and this x. And to undo that, I need to divide because it's multiplying. So x is going to equal 2. And remember that if you're going through these questions and you're like, what the heck is she doing? Go back to the videos that correspond to these examples that I'm doing, right? This is a summary video of what we've learned here. And then the very kind of last example that we can have, and we can have variations of this where we have brackets on both sides, so we have to multiply out. But really here, I have x's on 2 sides of my equation. And the first thing I ask myself is which side, the left side or the right side, has more x's. So here I have 7 x's. Here I have -3. 7 is bigger than -3. So I'm going to try to move everything over to my left-hand side of the equation. Okay, so if I look at this, if I'm looking at -3x on this side, to get rid of this, I need to add it. So I'm going to add my 3x to my left-hand side, and that cancels out my right-hand side. And now I'm going to gather my like terms, so anything that has an x in it can be combined. So 7x plus 3x, remember I use whatever sign is in front of that, so plus 3x. That's going to be 10 x's. And then I'm just going to write in my subtract 4 here, or my -4, and leave it like that. It all equals 12. And now I have an equation that I'm used to seeing. So I have subtract 4 here that I need to get rid of, and I undo subtracting or negative by positive. So I add. And I'm going to add that 4 to the opposite side of the equation. And now I ask myself what's happening between my 10x, my 10 and my x, and I'm multiplying there. So I need to undo multiplying with division. And this is one of those cases where we can have a decimal, and that's okay. So 16 divided by 10 is 1.6. Okay, so for this equation to work, I need to put 1.6 in for x. And this really is all of the examples that we've kind of talked about throughout the week. So if you need help with these, make sure that you're checking in. But yeah, this concludes the lesson. So pick any 5 questions that I haven't done, try to do them, and just continually check in. You might have to go back, make some notes, or go back and watch the other videos. Let me know how everything's going. I hope you guys have a great week.